Good morning, my sisters and brothers. Together we give thanks for all that God has given us on the earth in time and for what we look forward to in eternity. Thank you, our dear Lord. This is an email from Thursday, April 17th, 2003, 9:34 p.m. The subject is The Rich Family, but the title of the story is The Rich Family in Church, and it's credited to Eddie Ogan, O-G-A-N. I'll never forget Easter 1946. I was 14. My little sister Aussie was 12, and my older sister Darlene 16. We lived at home with our mother, and the four of us knew what it was to do without many things. My dad had died 5 years before, leaving Mom with 7 school kids to raise and no money. By 1946, my older sisters were married and my brothers had left home. A month before Easter, the pastor of our church announced that a special Easter offering would be taken to help a poor family. He asked everyone to save and give sacrificially. When we got home, we talked about what we could do. We decided to buy 50 pounds of potatoes and live on them for a month. This would allow us to save $20 of our grocery money for the offering. When we thought that if we kept our electric lights turned out as much as possible and didn't listen to the radio, we'd save money on that month's electric bill. Darlene got as many house and yard cleaning jobs as possible, and both of us babysat for everyone we could. For 15 cents we could buy enough cotton loops to make 3 pot holders to sell for $1. We made $20 on pot holders. That month was one of the best of our lives. Every day we counted the money to see how much we had saved. At night we'd sit in the dark and talk about how the poor family was going to enjoy having the money the church would give them. We had about 80 people in church, so I figured that whatever amount of money we had to give, the offering would surely be 20 times that much. After all, every Sunday the pastor had reminded everyone to save for the sacrificial offering. The day before Easter, Aussie and I walked to the grocery store and got the manager to give us 3 crisp $20 bills and 1 $10 bill for all our change. We ran all the way home to show Mom and Darlene. We had never had so much money before. That night we were so excited we could hardly sleep. We didn't care that we wouldn't have new clothes for Easter. We had $70 for the sacrificial offering. We could hardly wait to get to church. On Sunday morning, rain was pouring. We didn't own an umbrella, and the church was over a mile from our home. But it didn't seem to matter how wet we got. Darlene had cardboard in her shoes to fill the holes. The cardboard came apart and her feet got wet. But we sat in church proudly. I heard some teenagers talking about the Smith girls having on their old dresses. I looked at them in their new clothes, and I felt rich. When the sacrificial offering was taken, we were sitting on the second row from the front. Mom put in the $10 bill, and each of us kids put in 20. As we walked home after church, we sang all the way. At lunch, Mom had a surprise for us. She had bought a dozen eggs, and we had boiled Easter eggs with our fried potatoes. Late that afternoon, the minister drove up in his car. Mom went to the door, talked with him for a moment, and then came back with an envelope in her hand. We asked what it was, but she didn't say a word. She opened the envelope, and out fell a bunch of money. There were 3 crisp $20 bills, 1 $10, and 17 $1 bills. Mom put the money back in the envelope. We didn't talk. We just sat and stared at the floor. We kids had such a happy life that we felt sorry for anyone who didn't have our mom and dad for parents, and a house full of brothers and sisters, and other kids visiting constantly. We thought it was fun to share silverware and see whether we got the spoon or the fork that night. We had 2 knives that we passed around to whoever needed them. I knew we didn't have a lot of things that other people had, but I'd never thought we were poor. That Easter day I found out we were. The minister had brought us the money for the poor family, so we must be poor. I didn't like being poor. I looked at my dress and worn out shoes and felt so ashamed. I didn't even want to go back to church. Everyone there probably already knew we were poor. I thought about school. I was in the 9th grade and at the top of my class of over 100 students. I wondered if the kids at school knew that we were poor. I decided that I would quit school since I had finished the 8th grade. That was all the law required at that time. We sat in silence for a long time. Then it got dark and we went to bed. All that week, we girls went to school and came home and no one talked much. Finally, on Saturday, Mom asked us what we wanted to do with the money. What did poor people do with money? We didn't know. We'd never known we were poor. We didn't want to go to church on Sunday, but Mom said we had to. Although it was a sunny day, we didn't talk on the way. Mom started to sing, but no one joined in, and she only sang one verse. At church, we had a missionary speaker. He talked about how churches in Africa made buildings out of sun-dried bricks, but they needed money to buy roofs. He said $100 would put a roof on a church. The minister said, "Can't we all sacrifice to help these poor people?" We looked at each other and smiled for the first time in a week. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out the envelope. She passed it to Darlene. Darlene gave it to me, and I handed it to Aussie. Aussie put it in the offering. When the offering was counted, the minister announced that it was a little over $100. The missionary was excited. He hadn't expected such a large offering from our small church. He said, "You must have some rich people in this church." Suddenly it struck us. We had given 87 of that little over $100. We were the rich family in the church. Hadn't the missionary said so? From that day on, I have never been poor again. I've always remembered how rich I am because I have Jesus. I'm going to follow this with the reading from Luke chapter 12, verse 16 through 21. It's the parable of the rich fool. Then he told them a parable. There was a wealthy man whose land yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do, for I do not have sufficient space to store my crops?" Then he said, "This is what I will do. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, where I will store my grain and other produce. And I shall say to myself, now you have an abundance of goods stored up for many years to come. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be required of you, and who then will get to enjoy the fruit of your labors? That is how it will be for the one who stores up treasure for himself, yet fails to become rich in the sight of God." Some of the worldly rich people that come to mind to me: Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. Wealthy in worldly standards. And I'm not saying that heaven is out of reach for them, for Jesus said that it's easier for a rich man to pass through the eye of a needle than to enter the kingdom of heaven. The disciples responded, "Well, who then can be saved?" And Jesus answered, "For man it is impossible, but all things are possible for God." That according to Jesus, we are much wealthier than those people are at this moment. Let us rejoice in our wealth. Be happy with what we have. One of the interesting observations that come to mind to me is that poor people don't necessarily worry about becoming wealthy one day, do they? But wealthy people, from time to time, do worry about losing their wealth and becoming poor. Let us rejoice in our wealth that God has granted us. May God bless each and every one of you this day and always. May you find peace in your heart and in your family. And may we meet again tomorrow.